Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and sorry for the delay. Sorry for the delay in the start of this side event. We are very delighted today to start this side event on a very interesting topic. Food security, we know that is a very key issue. And we also know that it's highly threatened by climate change. And we are going to discuss a very interesting crop, a crop that maybe is not very well known in the world, but in the region where we're coming from, it's one of the main crops, and it's very interesting to see today through the different discussions we're going to have today how the value chain of such crop could address many issues, including job creation, economic issues, but also food security in Africa. So we know that the number of food insecure people in Africa is ever rising. An estimated 22 million Africans were facing severe food insecurity, and 21.5 million more than in 2020, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is exacerbated by incessant droughts and other climate extremes, and contributing to low agricultural production. Following the crisis in the two warring nations in Ukraine and Russia, Africa is currently experiencing a shortage, leading to a spike in the prices of the commodity heavily used in the baking industry. The IsDB is supporting its member countries and has identified cassava as a good alternative or booster to wheat, rice, and maize, because it is a good source of carbohydrates. With the production of maize and rice going down due to climate change, cassava, which is resilient to drought, offers hope amid challenging times. So the bank has developed a regional cassava value chain program, and it's addressing many SDGs, including SDG 1 on no poverty, 2 on zero hunger, SDG 3 assuring good health and well-being, and also aspects related to gender and climate action. So my colleagues here are going to present in further detail the regional program that we have. And we are very excited today to have a very good panel. But first, I will give the floor to Fali Badji, who is the lead global food security specialist at the Islamic Development Bank. Badji, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. As rightly stated by Dr. Dauda Njai here, is the Islamic Development Bank started, developing a regional cassava value chain program based on a lot of challenges. If you remember what happening in Russia and Ukraine, and our deeply over-reliance on wheat, for example, we need to rethink our food security actions and mechanisms to be undertaken in order to be really close to our member country. The number of food insecure people in Africa is ever rising, as rightly stated by Dr. Dauda Njai here. It increased from around 200 million in 2014 up to 346 million in 2020, and keep increasing. The drought and other climate extremes will continue to take a toll of livestock-related food and incomes, contributing to the vulnerability of Africa to food insecurity. The drivers of food insecurity in Africa include incessant low production, on which results on overdependence of importation. To respond to this persistent food insecurity in Africa, the Islamic Development Bank, through its Agriculture Rural Development Division of the Islamic Development Bank, initiated in 2020 the food resilience through roots and rubber crop, like tuber crops, IsDB regional cassava value chain program. A strategic vision to drive green economic growth in our member country. Cassava, a crop that the potential to play in Africa, in Africa's agriculture future, was selected. The CGRR systems has considered cassava the most important roots crop in sub-Saharan Africa. Its average consumption here exceeds 300 kg per person and per year, as soon as we rely on that. Now, if you look at our international partners, such as IFAD, such as Agrobiotech, such as ITA, UNDP, IGBA, ICRISAT, we are joining force to try together to tackle those challenges. If you look at the NEPAD initiative aiming and disseminating now cassava processing technology and developing regional market for the crop, we see that in 2018, the Global Cassava Partnership for the 20th centuries has called it on the policymakers, donor and international financial institutions to support all efforts that will bring about cassava transformation in our continent. Now, what IDB does in terms of approaches, if we consider our institution as the bank of developers, we need to rethink on how cassava, often being overlooked as a crop for commercial production, could contribute to Africa's agriculture growth. How the Islamic Development Bank could support investment in cassava by involving a diverse set of stakeholders and partners playing different roles in the cassava value chain. That include farmers, processors, traders, and marketers, researchers and scientists as well, policymakers and consumers. We also need to bring in technical implementing partners, financial development institutions as well, and by investing in cassava, African government can reduce their dependence on imported wheat flour, for example, improve food security, and support economic growth. Cassava, you may know, is a hard crop, it's a very hardy crop that is capable of growing in harsh conditions and can be used to produce a wide range of products. When we talk about climate adaptation, I think cassava is the one to be used for that. Cassava is also a major source of carbohydrate, as we know, and provide important nutrients, including dietary fibers, vitamin and minerals. With the right growing conditions, cassava can produce up to 50 tons of fresh roots per hectare, making it one of the most productive crops in the world. So I have the pleasure to introduce the Minister of Agriculture, His Excellency, the Adjumani in Côte d'Ivoire. Thank you. I think so. Welcome, Your Excellency. Bienvenue, Excellence. Merci. Yeah. And I think just coming to the point that we need to invest in cassava. We need to involve our government. We need to be like relying on research, on technical partners, on innovation. How are we gonna ensure that we will have the right materials, the right raw materials, the right breeder element to be put in together with technical equipment, seed, mechanizations, land development, and now access to market to be the one to be used. If you allow me, I will just move into French to summarize what we already developed here. Son Excellence, nous avons donc démarré la session ce matin par une présentation du programme régional sur le manioc de la Banque islamique de développement, qui a été une initiative qui a été développée suite non seulement à la guerre de l'Ukraine et de la Russie, mais parce que le manioc constitue quelque chose d'essentiel pour nos populations. Et ça a été une commodité qu'on a toujours développée, que ce soit en Côte d'Ivoire, au Bénin, au Togo, au Burkina Faso, et puis dans les autres pays à forte consommation de cassava. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes très heureux de vous compter parmi vous ici, parce que vous faites partie des premiers pays à bénéficier de ce programme et dont le projet a été présenté la semaine dernière en Côte d'Ivoire. J'y étais justement avec l'équipe pour préparer l'évaluation et nous nous dirigeons petit à petit vers son approbation au niveau du bureau du président pour pouvoir être exécuté dans les bonnes conditions. Sur ce, je voudrais vous remercier et vous souhaite encore la bienvenue. Et puis, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Thank you for all. Now, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, and welcome everyone again. So we are very delighted today to have very diverse and very interesting panel today. So we have His Excellency Mr. Kobenan Kwasi Adjumani, Minister of State, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire. Welcome, Your Excellency. We have Mrs. Betty Pamela Wabunoha, resident representative of UNDP in Equatorial Guinea. Welcome, Mrs. Wabunoha. We also have in the panel Dr. Kenton Dashiell, Deputy Director General, Partnership for Delivery at the IITA, based in Ibadan, Nigeria. Welcome. And also Mrs. Rebi Harawa from Malawi, and who works with ICRISAT, the International Crops Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, and she's a director for the Africa program. Welcome, Mrs. Harawa. So this panel is going to be moderated by Dr. Augusto Becerra Lopez Laval, Chief Scientist of the International Center for Biosaline Agriculture. So I will give you the floor, Dr. Augusto, to start this very interesting panel. Thank you.
So we are going to start our discussion, and today we have a very important topic to talk about, which is the value chain development of cassava. And so we'd like to address His Excellency Adjumani with the first question. Drawing upon your experience with the development in Côte d'Ivoire, what are the critical prerequisites for African governments to establish or facilitate to unlock and upscale the agro-industrial projects in Africa? Oh, okay.
Yes, I will translate for His Excellency. Excellence, sur la base de votre expérience en matière de développement agricole en Côte d'Ivoire, la question est quelles sont les conditions préalables essentielles que les gouvernements africains devraient mettre en place pour faciliter, débloquer et développer les projets agro-industriels en Afrique. Et nous savons que l'expérience en Côte d'Ivoire est une des plus belles en Afrique. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. Je voudrais, au nom du gouvernement de Côte d'Ivoire, vous remercier pour l'opportunité que vous nous donnez de participer à ce panel qui pour nous est d'une importance capitale. Vous savez, la Côte d'Ivoire effectivement a une expérience en matière de mise en place de plateformes agro-pastorales, agro-industrielles plutôt. Au niveau de notre pays, nous avons divisé la Côte d'Ivoire en 9 agropoles industriels. Nous avons mis en place le premier agropole à Yamoussoukro, le deuxième à Korogo et le troisième bientôt dans le nord-est de la Côte d'Ivoire. Mais l'objectif, c'est de pouvoir permettre que toute la Côte d'Ivoire soit subdivisée en agropoles. Cela va nous permettre de tenir compte des différentes spécificités agricoles dans les différentes régions. Et pour atteindre ces objectifs, il faut mettre d'abord un cadre légal, structurel et social au niveau donc des agro-industries. Nous avons un code des investissements qui s'inscrit dans un processus d'amélioration continue à travers une évaluation permanente. Parce que nous avons compris que pour atteindre nos objectifs visés, nous devrons pouvoir donc faciliter l'avènement des personnes qui veulent vraiment investir en Côte d'Ivoire. Et pour nous, le code des investissements est capital. Nous avons également le cadre social qui est un cadre de dialogue entre l'État de Côte d'Ivoire et le privé pour que les intérêts des uns et des autres, les intérêts surtout vitaux de toutes les parties soient préservés. Donc nous avons des consultations permanentes entre l'État de Côte d'Ivoire et tous ceux qui sont dans le domaine privé pour partager d'abord les différentes expériences et voir dans quelle mesure on peut parfaire les choses. Il y a ce cadre-là qui permet également d'orienter le cadre structurel. Parce que pour nous, le cadre structurel doit être bâti par les gouvernements et cela concerne surtout les infrastructures d'utilité publique. Parce qu'il est difficile de développer le secteur agro-industriel sans moyens de mettre en place des plateformes qui permettent d'abord de régler le problème d'eau, le problème d'électricité, le numérique, les routes pour accéder donc aux différents espaces, les ports également, qui doivent être également pris en compte dans le cadre de ce cadre structurel, et les agences spécialisées qui vont travailler à améliorer les conditions de tous ceux qui veulent venir vraiment s'implanter en Côte d'Ivoire. Il y a également le cadre social qui permet de prendre en compte les besoins spécifiques des investisseurs qui veulent venir en Côte d'Ivoire et qui peuvent se traduire par des mesures particulières pour certaines filières, afin bien évidemment de donner un peu plus de soutien à leur développement. Donc je crois que la première des choses à faire pour un État, c'est de favoriser l'avènement des investisseurs sur leur sol en permettant des faveurs qui soient accordées. Et en la matière, je puis dire que la Côte d'Ivoire a pris des mesures importantes dont l'objet consiste à favoriser la présence des investisseurs en Côte d'Ivoire. Nous aurons l'occasion d'aller plus en détail pour ce qui est des questions à venir. Je vous remercie.
Yes, thank you. Just to translate what His Excellency was explaining, the case of Côte d'Ivoire is a very interesting case. So, in terms of investments into agro industry, so the development of agro-processing zones has been key in the agricultural policy of Côte d'Ivoire. So the plan is to build 9 agro-processing zones in different regions in the country, taking into account the agricultural needs and the agro-ecological zones of these different areas. But it's very important to look at the cultural, social, and economic aspects, and also make sure that the environment is good for investment to come in the country. That's why the government has been very keen into enhancing its own policies, the investment codes, the social framework, allowing dialogue between public and private sector so that any issue can be addressed. The aspect of building the infrastructure as well, making sure that the infrastructure is in place through these different platforms, allowing for water, energy, digitalization, roads, ports, all to be connected so that these agro-processing zones could be at their optimal state. So the government is very keen to make sure that the investors are supported, and they are very actively working on that. Thank you.
So following the intervention of His Excellency, I would like to address Dr. Joy Katekwa from UNDP, coming from Guinea Equatorial. In the light of the crucial role that cassava plays in Africa, it is imperative to gain insights into the current status of the cassava subsector within the country, encompassing aspects as of production, marketing, and consumption. Additionally, it's essential to map out the various stakeholders in the cassava value chain. Could you please elaborate from the UNDP's experience in fostering development of inclusive market in agriculture and trade?
Very much, and it's a pleasure on behalf of UNDP to be part of this panel. Thinking about the presentation this morning, I would like to just repeat a story I had at a field visit and start there. So a lady, Akelo, from northwestern Uganda, we're visiting this community, and really it was not about agriculture, it was about inclusive growth and livelihoods. At the age of 26, with 2 little boys, she was struggling with an extra 4 children that challenges had brought her way that also had become part of her family. And when one of my colleagues asked the question, what are you doing for a livelihood? How do you support this family at the age of 26? She brought out a phrase that I will try to literally put into English, kind of that said, with a stick of cassava at the backyard, my family does not go to bed hungry. And I know this doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense in English, but if you put it into the local language, the way she said it, it was a very power-packed kind of phrase. This was a season where the rains had come really late. And this is an area, if people know that part of Uganda, where I come from Uganda, not from that part of the country, but in that part of Uganda, they really plant sorghum, millet, cassava. These are their main crops on the side of the food. And so at the time, thinking about it, we're talking about how she's looking after her family, but for me, it was like, it's food security. Cassava has survived the bad season, and the millet and the sorghum in this season when the rains came late was destroyed, and she felt that she could actually take her family, be able to provide for her family a meal if she had some cassava. And so I think about resilience. I think about the resilience of this crop, but I also think about food security. And I really wanted to start by that story that I only remembered this morning as I was trying to make my way to this place. So basically, on the question you ask, and for UNDP being in over 170 countries globally, we're given an opportunity of dealing with communities that have diverse cultures, but also diverse products out there. We support in very many areas, but I would really like to focus again on the cassava and what we've done under the cassava value chains. So notably, we started off this cassava value chain support in Cambodia. And this has been a very good case study. One of the pilot projects we have had there, which is accelerating inclusive cassava market development. From this project, we've learned a lot of things that we find resonate very much even when you come to Africa. We go all the way to Ivory Coast, we look at other areas, Ghana, where we are supporting some of these value chains, and we find the information resonates very well, irrespective of where you are with the crop. And even if the crop has different spaces, we still find the studies we've done around the cassava value chains are very relevant the whole way through. So in Cambodia, from that project, the agriculture sector in that country found that this was a very important product, and they have decided to make this one of their second leading agricultural products. And so this project has led us to also look at what can be done within Africa, seeing that we are coming to a point where, with the kind of challenges we have around the weather, agriculture is something, cassava might be that product that might be able to sustain our populations in times of troubles. But then when we go to the value chains, we did realize that also the traditional ways that they harvest the cassava and preserve it have not increased the value of the product. And so we've tried so hard to see how we help women, youth, and small middle income enterprises around this, just trying to reduce the post-harvest loss in terms of the way they dry it, the way they clean it, how they take it from the gardens, but also how they can turn it into different products that they're able to sell out to be able to make some kind of living. So looking into how we help them create that supply chain. You know, how do you help them improve the product, but then how do you help them get to the market? How do you help them ensure that the product is packaged well, but also how can they process it very quickly, some kind of less labor-intensive way of doing this business. We also found that dealing with this, there was a lot of need to partner with some of the organizations within the UN, like the IFAD. And so with IFAD and in collaboration with IFAD, we have found ourselves being able to combine what we bring on as comparative advantage and what the IFAD could bring on as comparative advantage. And so we find those partnerships become very critical for us going forward in terms of how we do this. But also other governments we've assisted within the Africa region have been like, for example, Sierra Leone, linking the farmers to the market, trying to create digital tools in Madagascar to enable the farmer be able to connect to the seller. They do not know where they are. I have the product, somebody needs the supply, how do you know who needs it? So through these digital tools and social apps, we've found that this has been something that has helped them to scale up their ability to sell and also make a livelihood, which is really the underscore also for this, apart from food security. And so we also conducted a study, and I would like to probably end close to this. We conducted a study on research on how to leverage agriculture opportunity for food sovereignty in Africa. This study highlighted the sovereignty through increased domestic production and key development goals for Africa. So we found in this study that staple foods like rice and wheat were not as self-sufficient for the family households, and the cassava seemed to really take them the extra mile. We also found that within the regional trade and markets, this was important, that we increase competitiveness of the product, but also we raise the production, but also try to see how we lower prices, because we found for every additional technology or equipment they put into this, the prices of the cassava products went higher. So trying to balance that became very important. And then also trying to leverage on the regional market, because we've always learned that we need to be exporting. And when we're talking about exporting in Africa, we've always thought of taking it across the oceans. But coming to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, we find that there is a lot we can do within the market that we have in Africa of about 1.2 billion people. Not all the areas really are growing cassava, and I think trying to just make sure we take the products within the market here first before we go across is very important. I'll stop at that for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think for people that work in cassava before, a lot of the things that you said resonate. And what is important is cassava is a resilient and sustainable means for livelihood. So I think this is a very key message. Following your intervention, I would like to address Dr. Rebi Harawa, Director for the African Program for ICRISAT. And the question for you is cassava mostly grown in the humid tropics? And with your institute primary legacy building on 50 years of agricultural research in the global drylands, what motivates ICRISAT to take on a key role in the regional cassava value chain program?
Thank you very much, and I would like to also echo with the previous presenter that we really appreciate for inviting ICRISAT to be part of this very important discussion. Indeed, ICRISAT, we work in the dryland agroecologies, focusing on transforming the food systems in these dryland agroecologies. And if you look at the continent of Africa, we are literally talking of 60% of the agroecologies which fall into this category. And so as ICRISAT, we are actually developing crop varieties that are more adaptable to these dryland agroecologies, from sorghum, millets, pigeon peas, groundnuts. And these are crops that are really resilient to these dryland agroecologies, loaded with nutrients. But as you have heard from the previous speaker, that this is also an environment where you find the cassava thriving. And so it's very important that when we are looking at the dry land agroecologies, we look at this from the whole food systems. It's the same farmer growing the sorghum, same farmer growing the cassava, same farmer growing the groundnuts. And so with the work that we do, developing improved varieties of sorghum millets, and I'm glad to say that I'm sitting next to the next speaker from IITA that are focusing on developing the cassava varieties. And when we are in the dry land agroecologies, we are looking at this cassava to make sure that these seeds, the seedlings they are putting together, they have to be delivered. So ICRISAT, we are not just developing these crop varieties, but we also have seed systems that takes the varieties into the hands of the smallholder farmers. As I mentioned, it's the same farmer growing all these crops, and it's the same seed systems that we use to deliver this cassava. Another very important element is the management of soil and water. These dry land agroecologies are very much struggling with issues of water, but also low soil fertility. We provide the good agronomic practices. We provide the technologies. We are talking of rotations of cereals and legumes to improve the biological nitrogen fixation. Those agronomic solutions, you need to provide them as a package for the entire cropping system. You're looking at crops that farmers will not just grow and consume at the household level. They also have to make a livelihood. And therefore, we also promote value addition. And both cassava and sorghum millets, you actually find that these are crops that if we bring the value addition, these dry land agroecologies, we can actually help the inhabitants of these dry land agroecologies, which is actually 2/3 of the population of Africa, to thrive under these dry land agroecologies. And so we are promoting mechanization, value addition. We are actually working with different governments to promote the blending of sorghum millets with cassava, maize, and rice, and wheat. I think in the opening we heard about the crisis in Ukraine, and Russia had a ripple, actually, it had a spillover effects as far as wheat shortage is concerned in Africa. We are working with governments that this has a value of import substitution when we promote crops like sorghum, millets, and cassava, because you can actually have these in the confectionaries. So a good example is Kenya, where the government is working on a flour blending policy. 20% sorghum millets mixed with cassava, mixed with maize, and you can use that for household consumption, commonly ugali, but we're also seeing that in the confectionaries. The other important elements, I think you talked about the commercialization. Commercialization is very important, and it needs to have a de-risking of the whole value chain. And so I'm glad that ICRISAT, we are already working in partnership with the Islamic Development Bank on a regional value chain project in West Africa, where we are bringing in the data to look at the entire value chain. You start from who is the buyer, what are the exact varieties they are looking for cassava and any of the crops that they are working in. The market information that has to get in there should also bring together climate information so that the farmer can know when to grow what crop at what point. So we are also part of that whole project where we are bringing in the dimension of de-risking the whole value chain. And so because of that, when we look at ourselves as ICRISAT, we see that cassava is one of the crops that we can definitely move together with partners like IITA in these dry land agroecologies of Africa. Thank you.
Very important. I think for most of us that know cassava, You know, cassava is a safe box. That's what I wanted to call it, because it's a crop that lasts a year on the field, where you can have 3 or 4 rounds of millets, and then you get your cassava to, you know, top up that economic initiative. And then we have to see crops as ingredients.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned it quite clear, and that adds to His Excellency remarks on developing value chains and developing this infrastructure for food production. So I think this is we are getting to why cassava is so important, and then we are going to address you know, a very important person in the cassava world, which is Kenton Dashiell. This is the Deputy Director General for Partnerships Delivery at the IATA, which is a very well-known organization for driving, you know, development of cassava in Africa. And through a combination of conventional and new approaches, IITA has developed improved cassava varieties, which combine multiple pest disease resistances with superior post-harvest qualities and high yield potential that reflects the vision of an expanded future for cassava, food, feed, and industrial applications in Africa. However, cassava sector in Africa has been continues to be constrained by a low on-farm productivity and market difficulties. Do you think that a solution could be promoted through a value chain addition and research targeting diverse markets in schemes to commercialize the crop, enabling it to contribute significantly to poverty reduction strategies in the continent?
Yeah, thank you very much. Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Côte d'Ivoire, distinguished members of the panel, my colleagues at Islamic Development Bank, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to have this opportunity to meet with you today. And thank you very much for this very good question. I'm really excited about what my colleagues have already said. I feel like I'm on a panel with people who have been cassava experts their whole life. It's really quite amazing. And I'm really excited about the plans of Côte d'Ivoire that they have for these, was it 6 or 9 industrial agro-processing zones. You know, I think, Honorable Minister, cassava is going to be in all 9 of these processing zones. And I want to assure you that IITA and other colleagues, your national research system, we are all here to support you to make sure that this is highly, highly successful. And I know colleagues in the Islamic Development Bank will also be there to support. So we're looking forward to that very, very much. You know, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to describe how and why cassava is such a good crop for climate resilience. Because it's kind of logical and practical to understand that when, and I definitely want to make it clear that cassava is not here to solve all the problems. We must have crop diversity, livestock diversity, but okay, today we're talking about cassava. So cassava, as already been described, is a long duration crop. Between, say, 10 to 14 months would kind of be the average you would want your cassava to be growing from the time you plant it to the time you harvest. And basically, to have a good cassava crop, you need to plant it at least, say, 3 or 4 weeks before the rain stops, okay? So a lot of places in Africa, that's like the end of the growing season. But you can also plant it at the very beginning of the growing season. So you can be planting your cassava for 4, 5, 6, 7 months. And a lot of farmers do that. Every few weeks, they'll plant some more cassava. What does that mean? It means you can also be harvesting it for 6 or 7 or 8 months, okay? And during that year, as long as cassava has sprouted and is, 10, 20 centimeters tall and has some leaves, if you have a drought for 3 months, 4 months, when it starts raining again, it'll just start growing again, okay? So these are the characteristics that make cassava, it's like a food security crop. It's highly resilient. And farmers for hundreds of years have been growing cassava like that, making sure they have at least carbohydrate for their family. But in many places in Africa, cassava is a high protein crop also, because in many places, people eat cassava leaf every day. 365 days a year, they eat cassava leaf, because every morning or afternoon, they go pick some cassava leaves, take it home and cook it as a vegetable. And it is highly, highly nutritious. So it's interesting, we have both of those characteristics. I do want to say one thing. In some places, there is like a fear of cassava. Oh, I hear cassava has high cyanide, it's very dangerous. Trust me, as long as you cook cassava, it is safe. Safe. It's true if you go and harvest cassava and peel it and start eating it raw, some genotypes, some clones could make you sick. But trust me, if you cook it, you're fine. Now, okay, so I hope we've understood that the logic of why cassava is good if you're encountering irregular rainfall, droughts, things like that. It can provide food security. But I want to talk a minute about cassava as a money-making crop, cassava that is making money for farmers, making money for industry, and helping governments to reduce importation of so many things that they import right now. And one of them, we've already talked about it, is cassava flour that we put in bread. In Nigeria, 5 or 10% cassava flour, you'd never know the difference. It just like normal bread. You know, I was always worried about Francophone Africa and the baguette. But in the last 1 year, there's been a lot of bakers in Kinshasa, DR Congo, Kinshasa. Lots of them that are mixing cassava flour with wheat flour, 10%. What they tell us is their customers say, what have you done? This cassava bread is better than it used to be. This baguette with the, the baguette. They said, the baguette, what did you do today? Something is different here. It tastes better. And anyway, that's what they're telling us. But to be honest, I always thought the baguette, if you change that just a little bit, it'll be rejected. But evidently, it's working. Those bakers needed to be trained because the processing is not exactly the same as you do with the 100% wheat. So your question was a lot about diversity in products. How can we improve the marketing? And this is not theoretical. This is practical that's happening in Africa right now. And at least I can say for sure it's happening in Nigeria because I'm right there every day seeing what is going on. And I know this can happen across Africa. We have industrial scale processing of course, it's all private company. This is not government, it's not research. This is private companies that have invested millions of dollars to build their factories. They're processing starch, so importation of starch is being reduced. They're processing sorbitol. I didn't even know what sorbitol is, but evidently it's something that is in toothpaste. Every time you brush your teeth with toothpaste, sorbitol is in there. And all African countries are importing it. In Nigeria, the toothpaste companies are just buying all the sorbitol they can get from this cassava processing factory. Glucose, all know glucose. Ethanol for to replace gasoline. Animal food. There's two things that are really becoming very popular in Nigeria now. It's cassava chips. And this is really popular in China. China says they will import any amount of cassava chips to feed their livestock. Any amount. But basically, it's cassava chopped up and dried. And that's an animal feed. But what's even more popular in Nigeria right now, and it can expand, is the cassava peels. For almost all cassava foods, you peel it first. And those peels can be processed and dried and put in poultry feed, cattle feed, etc. And then in in every African country where cassava is grown, they're the traditional foods. And they're numerous and they're diverse in countries. But these traditional foods basically take cassava and process it so that it can be stored. Because once you harvest cassava, if you don't process it, it will spoil in about 48 hours. So you do need to process it when you harvest it, whether it's in industrial processing or small-scale local processing. So yes, the answer to your question, it took me a long time, but the answer is yes. We can greatly add to the value of cassava with diverse types of uses. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, thank you. I think it was great that you brought the angle of the protein of cassava, because normally cassava get this stigma that is only a bag of energy and not having this capacity. But the leaves of cassava has as much protein as soya bean has. And one of the things that is wonderful about cassava is that the leaves, if you give it to the animals, it will produce a third of the methane that will do otherwise produce if they get, supplements. So that's, something important to mention. Okay, yes, please. For the minister, yes.
For the minister. Excellence, désolé pour le manque d'interprètes, mais je vais essayer de résumer donc cette première partie pour vous. Juste pour dire que donc, notre compatriote du PNUD a bien expliqué ce que le PNUD faisait pour appuyer donc les chaînes de valeur du manioc. En prenant l'exemple d'études qui ont été faites au Cambodge, et ces études ont essayé de voir comment les petites et moyennes entreprises pouvaient être aidées pour vraiment être actifs dans la chaîne de valeur du manioc. Et essayer de voir comment cela pouvait être répliqué, quelles sont les leçons apprises et qui pouvaient être répliquées dans les pays africains. Et également, donc, le PNUD a établi des partenariats avec des organisations des Nations Unies telles que le FIDA, etc. Et donc, il y a des cas qu'elle a cités comme au Sierra Leone, où donc, ces études ont permis également d'aider les agriculteurs à avoir accès au marché. Un autre aspect qui a été développé par notre collègue de ICRISAT est le fait que donc c'est un institut de recherche qui travaille vraiment sur les terres arides. Et donc le travail sur les terres arides a permis de voir que dans un même système agroécologique, on pouvait voir qu'il y avait plusieurs types donc de produits qui sont cultivés. Et donc ça a suscité des opportunités de mélange. Et il y a eu donc des cas de farine qui ont été mélangés, donc pour voir comment le manioc peut être mélangé avec le blé. Et ça, c'est très important, surtout en cette période de crise où l'importation du blé a été un problème. Et donc, maintenant, pour le cas de l'IITA, donc l'IITA est vraiment une institution de recherche sur le manioc. Et donc le professeur expliquait vraiment quelles sont quels sont les différents types d'utilisation, donc des produits du manioc. Et il a donné le cas du Nigeria où vraiment il y a différents produits, donc, et donc les industries sont très actives et donc c'est un grand marché maintenant parce qu'on voit que donc les produits dérivés du manioc, rien que la feuille de manioc est très 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 nutritive et donc elle est utilisée par les populations. Mais également, c'est vraiment un produit qui est utilisé également pour... donc les produits incluent l'amidon, le sorbitol. Donc le sorbitol, on a appris donc que c'est quelque chose qui est introduit dans les pâtes dentifrice. Donc c'est vraiment un produit qui peut être commercialisé. Et également le glucose, l'éthanol et également l'aliment de bétail. Donc vous voyez qu'il y a vraiment différents produits qui peuvent être dérivés de la culture du manioc et donc l'Institut est prêt à appuyer la Côte d'Ivoire et il fait un pari avec vous que dans les 9 zones, dans les 9 agropoles, dans tous les agropoles, il y aura la production de manioc. Merci.
Now that you've been briefed, Your Excellency, I would like to address you with a question about, could you tell us how African governments could scale up and scale out experience made in the past for further increase access to smallholder farmers and households, especially youth, to innovate technologies and market approaches to address the issue of institutional and policy constraints and technical barriers in cassava production in the transformation of the cassava sector?
Donc, permettez-moi de changer de métier pour 1h30. Je suis devenu interprète. Pourriez-vous nous dire comment les gouvernements africains pourraient renforcer et étendre les expériences faites dans le passé pour améliorer l'accès des petits agriculteurs et des ménages, en particulier les jeunes, aux technologies innovantes et aux approches du marché? Et ceci pour aborder les questions des contraintes institutionnelles, politiques, également des barrières techniques dans la production de manioc, en particulier, et dans le cadre de la transformation du secteur du manioc en général. Merci.
Merci, mais tout à l'heure, par rapport à ce que le professeur a dit, effectivement, au niveau de notre pays, nous avons décidé de produire du manioc. Produire du manioc dans tous les 9 agropoles. Parce que le manioc est un produit de substitution dans d'autres régions. C'est vrai qu'au sud, on ne consomme pour la plupart que le manioc à travers les produits dérivés tels que la tiéké, qui est quand même labellisé Côte d'Ivoire, tout le monde le sait. Notre tiéké n'a rien à voir avec la tiéké que vous pouvez découvrir ailleurs. Donc nous avons décidé de le faire parce que d'abord le manioc est une culture qui résiste à toutes les saisons. Ce n'est pas le cas d'autres produits qui sont saisonniers et qu'on ne consomme que pendant des périodes données. Si vous faites le constat, vous allez voir que sur toute l'année, le manioc est utilisé. Alors que dans d'autres localités, il y a des spécificités agricoles dues à l'habitude de consommation. Maintenant, je vais répondre à votre question pour dire qu'il faut d'abord rendre la production rentable. Il faut la rendre rentable, mais en même temps aussi durable pour le producteur. Pour le producteur, tout en permettant la mise en marché de ces produits de qualité et à des coûts abordables. Pour ce faire, nous avons décidé de maintenir une offre publique en produits de recherche. Cela est important parce qu'il faut pouvoir disposer des variétés diversifiées au niveau donc du manioc et des variétés performantes à des coûts accessibles pour les petits producteurs. Il y a également une existence de plusieurs variétés productives de manioc qui sont adaptées aux différents usages alimentaires du manioc. Il y a du manioc qui est bon pour faire la tiéké, il y en a pour accompagner la banane dans le foutou, et avec l'amidon, on peut faire du placali. Ce sont des termes de chez nous, mais qui sont connus de tous, puisque c'est les mets issus donc du manioc sont devenus des mets internationaux. Il suffit seulement de venir en Côte d'Ivoire et même d'aller ailleurs pour vous rendre compte de cela. Et donc, il faut aussi, par rapport aux jeunes, soutenir et faire la promotion donc, des jeunes innovateurs, comme ça a été précisé dans la question, à travers, bien sûr, des mécanismes de financement pour démontrer la faisabilité de leurs propositions, de leurs projets, et également attirer le secteur privé pour la mise à l'échelle. Et je crois qu'aujourd'hui, avec la modernisation de l'agriculture, les jeunes ont tendance à s'adonner au métier agricole et surtout, en particulier, le manioc qui, comme vous l'avez dit, présente beaucoup de dérivés. Il faut également réduire les pertes post-récolte. Cela est important parce que l'expérience a montré que plus de 30 à 40% de ce que nous produisons n'arrive pas à la consommation, faute de conservation. Et donc, pour nous, la meilleure façon de réduire ces pertes, c'est l'entretien donc, des infrastructures routières. J'en avais parlé au départ. La création de magasins de stockage et mettre en place aussi de petites unités de transformation parce que il faut pouvoir donc impulser la transformation des produits locaux et en particulier du manioc. Donc, en Côte d'Ivoire, nous avons créé des structures d'appui à l'élaboration de la création des chaînes de valeur des produits, par exemple de l'atiéké. Et nous avons l'IDT qui, en la matière, est approprié pour produire donc des installations qui permettent la transformation du manioc dans tous les dérivés que nous connaissons. Il y a également la possibilité d'établir des partenariats avec les institutions de recherche étrangères et pour accélérer, bien sûr, le transfert de technologies. Et vous savez qu'en Côte d'Ivoire, nous avons le CNRA qui fait beaucoup de recherches dans le domaine donc, des produits agricoles pour trouver des semences améliorées, des boutures à haut rendement, et cela est également un acquis pour notre pays. Mais nous devons aussi soutenir le transfert de technologies entre le Sud et le Nord lors donc des négociations au niveau des différentes COP. Nous avons décidé de soutenir les petites et moyennes entreprises pour qu'elles puissent plutôt acquérir des chaînes de valeur dans le cadre de donc, la transformation, c'est-à-dire depuis la production jusqu'à la consommation, il faut que la chaîne de valeur soit un suivi efficace. Valoriser les produits donc, du terroir à travers des mécanismes de labellisation. Et aujourd'hui, je puis dire que la Côte d'Ivoire vient de bénéficier donc, de ces atouts-là. Quand on parle de l'attiqué des lagunes, c'est quelque chose qui est propre à la Côte d'Ivoire, que vous n'allez trouver nulle part ailleurs. Parce que notre attiqué, en plus d'être succulent, mais il fond dans la bouche comme du beurre. Et donc, je vous invite à en consommer lorsque vous êtes en Côte d'Ivoire. Il faut également rapprocher les produits agricoles et alimentaires des consommateurs. Cela est important et c'est sur ça que je termine. C'est-à-dire que nous avons, au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire, décidé de créer des marchés de gros, des centres de groupage et de marchés ruraux pour permettre que les produits ne s'évadent pas et que toute la production puisse être commercialisée. Et nous mettons souvent, à travers des systèmes mis en place, nous mettons en relation les petits producteurs avec, bien sûr, les grands distributeurs, de sorte que le marché soit approvisionné convenablement. Et à ce niveau-là, il faut aussi mettre en place une politique qui permette d'encadrer les prix des produits alimentaires de base. Parce que si nous mettons en place un encadrement, il n'y a pas de raison que nous puissions sécuriser le producteur et en même temps aussi permettre aux consommateurs d'accéder facilement à notre production. En fait, les solutions sont nombreuses. Nous ne pouvons pas, à travers ce panel, donner un aéropage de tout ce que nous connaissons donc, du manioc. Mais ce qu'il faut retenir, c'est que pour nous, le manioc mérite d'être célébré et mérite d'être développé. Parce que, comme je vous l'ai dit, c'est quelque chose de résilient, mais qui résiste aussi à toutes les saisons. Je vous remercie.
So we are now addressing Dr. Joy Kategwa. This is a short question. Encouraging investment in cassava sector through the introduction of national policies is an important and timely move for Africa. Could you tell us your experience of UNDP in overcoming market failure in Africa?
Very much again. In terms of market failures, there are quite a number of them. There are some that are very basic, but there are those that are more complicated. Simple ones involve just changing the mindsets of the people in terms of them knowing what can be done out of cassava, what are the different options. Going back to the lady I just talked about, a kilo, I believe for her it was just a little, feed her family, maybe eat the leaves, and probably is doing nothing with the rest of the cassava, and that is thrown away. So how do we share this information across populations? How do we scale up areas where we've already seen quite good progress in terms of processing and adding the value to the cassava growers? I think this is something that now goes to the next level for which we really need to scale up in terms of this. We've seen experience in different areas where, for example, you talk about the bread, and I think that becomes a more complicated scenario because very few communities really think that beyond having the pap, the ugali, you can actually use the cassava for making bread or the baguette. And so these are the kind of things we need to really change mindsets, that even the people that are consuming are able to take this on and actually become the market that we need. So, for example, if we go to the areas where we've seen good progress, I think some of the market failures have been around access to finance for some of these small and medium enterprises. This has been a big market gap because for those that have learned that they could do so much through the cassava are struggling in terms of access to finance because it's not even a product that some of the banks are really know a lot about, so even the proposal doesn't sound very enticing. So partnerships around that, and I think partnering with the Islamic Development Bank has been very good in terms of bringing this to the fore and actually increasing the value around cassava. But in Tanzania, we've helped also, through UNDP support, we've helped to design innovative financial products, training bank officers in how to lend for some of these complex products that are not normally known in the financial sector for the entire value chain cycle. And so we've seen loans and grants improving and going up to about $30 million in this country. And I think that has been good progress in trying to close that gap. But also very weak market linkages in terms of income losses for the farmers. In Malawi, just trying to create an e-commerce platform connecting cassava farmers to buyers. I talked about that also a bit earlier on the first part of the question, because sometimes people have really produced products, they have them, but they have them stuck somewhere and they're finding it difficult to sell while there is somebody ready to buy it somewhere. You talked about China ready to take the cassava chips for their cattle feed. Some of these farmers don't have this information, so trying to bring these two together would help, and we believe that with that there would be increased prices, but also increased selling along the business people that are working along this chain. We need to help them increase their competitiveness, but that is also going to be along the product quality. And again, we go back to how do we mechanize the process. If they continuously do it manually, first of all, the cassava, you need to keep it clean. We talked about the time lag between the time of harvest to the time you really get it to a good product. That is also limited to make sure it doesn't end up with the wrong flavors, but also get contaminated along the way. And so this is also going to be something that's very important. How do we teach even these small, medium enterprises how to manage a business, even the financial part, just trying to understand how do I see this as a livelihood, put in money and I'm able to calculate whether I'm making a profit or not, and not just keeping myself busy from day to day. So UNDP has consistently been supporting governments with some of these design areas, but also national policies that can help to reduce the competitiveness of imported products. There is a lot of importation of foodstuffs, some of which can be replaced with the cassava, but also they could be supplemented. So if there is national policy and standards that are conducive for this agribusiness growth, we realize that this is something that can improve, and we've also been able to start these conversations at government level. Through a multi-pronged approach also in addressing information, financing, but also the infrastructure policy, institutional gaps within the ministries, for example, in the Ministry of Agriculture, when they have very good initiatives, and I really like the one we had from the Cote d'Ivoire government. How do we bring this down, simplify it for the local producer in a way that they can consume this policy, understand the government's vision, and get themselves plugged into this vision. So those interlinkages become very important for us. And so we shall continue to do this and prioritize the support to just make sure we play that role of interlinking the government side policy with the more grassroots levels of the farmers, and just trying to make sure we're helping them link with the market, point them to where they can get additional support, work with the big players in the market, the Islamic Development Bank, to make more programs around this, but also how we take it across borders. How do we take this across borders and not stick within one country and the knowledge within one country?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I would like now to ask Dr. Revi Harawa. We have heard that digital technologies and digital information is key for moving forward the system transformation. Which type of innovations do you propose deploy which you believe hold the greatest potential to engineer sustainable and inclusive change in the African smallholder agriculture?
Yeah, thank you very much. Digital agriculture is very critical to really transform the whole food systems. As my colleague has said, we need to go beyond the subsistence agriculture. It has to be agribusiness, because the farmers, they have to feed their family, they have to send their kids to school, they also have to have a decent life, and we need to bring business. So as ICRISAT, we have agribusiness incubation platforms, and within this, we are actually looking at how do we help the farmers access inputs. So they need to have information about where to get the seed, what type of seed, and where to get the fertilizer and any other inputs. That is the information that they can find easily on their mobile platform or any other digital platform. We are talking about agro-advisories, the agronomic practices. When to plant, what should be the spacing between the different plant pattern. All that information, you can easily find it within one platform. You are talking of climate information. We have been able to work with climate information modeling and be able to bring that to a platform where farmers can actually access that type of information. I think I mentioned in my previous submission that the other element that is very critical is to make sure that there is a system that we are supporting. Most of the work that we have done in, all of us here, it's always been around projects. Projects come, projects go. But I think we need to build sustainability around this. So one of the things that we do as ICRISAT is to study the value chain. If you look at this work that we have been doing, sorghum, millets, groundnuts, we look at this value chain 20, 30 years from now. You subject it under the different climatic conditions. You look at this from the different marketing prices globally as well. You put that together, and that's the information that we work together even with the policymakers to actually guide them where do they need to invest. And when we are sitting here, when we talk of cassava, going beyond just the usual maize and millets, etc., that's when we provide that knowledge and say, you need to diversify in Cote d'Ivoire. In the different agro-processing zones, you need to have cassava, millets, and groundnuts, etc. That information is something that ICRISAT we are able to generate. Even more importantly, the water advisory. We are able, using again our modeling, but also getting into the soil depth, be able to know with this kind of cropping system, in the next 20 years, if you are going to do some irrigation, you are going to be depleting your water, and therefore you need to bring in the aspect of landscape watershed management in order to conserve the water. So it's really bringing sustainability so that we should go beyond these projects and bring sustainability to these food systems in the African continent. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very clear. And last but not least, this is the question when we end this very important symposium. Dr. Dashiell, as a financer of African agriculture, collaborate with development financiers, including IsDB, to support new entities partnering with farmers in cassava cultivation for industrial production. How can research institutions like IITA commit to enhance their research efforts? Specifically, how can they intensify their focus on developing improved cassava varieties that exhibit enhanced attributes such as faster yields and increased ethanol and starch content?
Yeah, thank you very much for this very, very good question. I'm glad to report that we are making very good progress in this area to ensure that the cassava roots that are harvested have the characteristics needed for specific end users. And I don't want to go into great detail, but we have clearly seen that the roots that are desirable for home use or home processing, working with women in the villages that actually do this every day, are different than those roots that we would mainly be produced for sale to industry, who are producing starch or ethanol, etc. And so we have diversified our breeding program to address these different end users. But looking at, so I just want to assure you that is happening. And it's in partnership with the industries to make sure we're giving them what they need, and it's in partnership with those that process to traditional foods to make sure we're doing that right. But all of this good work in the breeding does not result into benefiting society and the industries, etc., unless the farmers have those improved clones in their fields. And this is a major challenge for cassava, because when you harvest the seeds of cassava on 1 hectare, and a seed of cassava is a stick, a piece of cassava stem about this long, you get enough stems to plant 10 hectares when you harvest 1 hectare. So it's a multiplication of 10 to 1. Where in a crop like maize, it might be like 200 to 1 or 300 to 1. Again, I don't want to go into details, but there's something called SAH that now, when we get the private sector companies to use that, it comes closer to 1 to 100. So thank you very much. We are doing our best to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much to all the panelists. It's been very informative, and I would like you to give a round of applause to them, because it's been quite wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Augusto, Dr. Augusto. Merci beaucoup, Excellence. Thank you very much, Dr. Kenton, Jeremy, Terry, and Betty also. Whatever we are developing here, I think we need to support our government. As rightly stated by His Excellency, we need also to support policy design and delivery around cassava. We need to provide to them a policy technically correct, but politically supportable, but also organizationally implementable. That's why here we need to be one for our member country. Son Excellence, j'ai le plaisir aussi de vous annoncer que la semaine qui va venir, le 12, 13 et 14, tous ces panélistes-là seront présents en Côte d'Ivoire pour une grande conférence formation sur le cassava. Donc, ça c'est... Et j'ai aussi le plaisir d'annoncer aussi qu'une personne qui n'est pas dans le panel, Agrobiotech, qui travaille en collaboration avec ITA, CNRA, pour tout ce qui est acquisition, développement de variétés aptes à ce que vous avez dit, parce qu'on va avoir des cassavas, des variétés qui seront aptes pour la production de gari, acheke, placali, mais aussi des variétés qui seront dédiées pour la production de farine de manioc, comme on l'appelle les high cassava flour. On a aussi la possibilité de développer avec IDTE l'industrie de l'amidon. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, quand nous mettons en place tout l'aspect lié à la productivité, il faut apporter une valeur ajoutée. Et cette valeur ajoutée-là se fera avec les partenaires techniques parce que la finalité, finalement, c'est de permettre de créer des emplois, de permettre de créer une véritable entreprise, secteur privé, autour du manioc et au-delà du manioc. Merci beaucoup encore et merci.
No, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.